On the first day of Christmas, my true love sent to me a VPN for months for free. This video was sponsored by Surfshark VPN. You know what a VPN is, right? Quick catch up for those who don't. Security on public Wi-Fi. Access to country-locked streaming services and websites. Potentially cheaper travel tickets. Netflix locks you out of so much entertainment that when browsing virtually, you get access to shows like Twin Peaks and The Twilight Zone that aren't available in the UK. I recently started watching JoJo's Bizarre Adventures. The 3rd and 4th seasons are exclusively available in Japan, or if you have Surfshark VPN, you can download and watch them in whatever country you like. It's absolutely magic. There are countless VPNs out there, so I'll outline for you why Surfshark takes the cake for me. For one thing, most of the servers I've used are actually fast. I've used VPNs in the past that unlocked Netflix content, but it was usually low quality and sometimes just broke entirely. I've never had this experience whilst using Surfshark. One subscription allows for use on unlimited devices. They even have a 30-day money-back guarantee if you don't like it. Try Surfshark VPN today by clicking my link in the description. There you'll get access to an 83% discount and 4 months free membership. If somebody bought me a 28-month membership of Surfshark VPN for Christmas, I'd be a very happy man. Now, without further ado, let's get on with the review. Spice. Just consider this video to be an extension of my thoughts on this episode that I laid out in my Partners in Crime review. The episode begins with another zoom from space. My god, I'm having deja vu. It's sad because I associate that intro with Rose, who at this point in the story we believe we aren't going to be seeing again. This theme of missing Rose runs rampant throughout this episode, and I'll discuss its exploration as we go through it. Donna got teleported into the TARDIS, which puts her in the position of Bridezilla versus the confused Doctor. You'll find that The Runaway Bride opens with a far more cleanly lit reshoot of the Doomsday epilogue because they hired different lighting supervisors. This moment connected well with the Doctor's first time repetition and provided an interesting first time TARDIS encounter with a human that wasn't aware of the bigger on the inside concept until later. The Doctor getting too wrapped up in the mystery whilst Donna believed a conspiracy against her was taking place made for great humour. Without knowing how great of a companion Donna will make in the future, this episode alone would undeniably raise a few eyebrows. Catherine Tate was best known in 2006 for The Catherine Tate Show, something myself and others were never really that bothered by. On the surface, her inclusion would seem like a massive turn-off, but I firmly believe that this character isn't a future Lauren Cooper or anything and stands on her own 2 feet. All the more reason to develop her over the course of a whole season as opposed to just having her as a companion for a standalone episode. Rose's shirt being left behind made a truly heartrending moment. This is the face of a man you don't want to mess with right now. According to Julie Gardner and David Tennant in the commentary for this episode, they originally had a moment where the Doctor threw Rose's shirt out into space. This was cut for being too melodramatic, and even trying to picture such a scene, I feel inclined to agree with that decision. The pair then arrived on Earth. The episode's energy was still buzzing, with Donna being completely overwhelmed by the Doctor's world she's been forced into. This reluctant obligation on the part of the Doctor matched up perfectly with Donna's need to escape from him. They both wanted the same thing, but the suspicious circumstances surrounding the pair's convergence created the right amount of conflict to make their partnership a goal to obtain. The taxi hailing sequence was great, accompanied by the repeating jokes like the Doctor being a Martian and pockets. The Doctor then needed a big wee-wee before the pilot fish showed up again. It's so obviously cheap, and even trying to explain their existence is a bit of a stretch this time. We get it. They like sparkling yellow energy. The Doctor then prevented a massacre by shooting out fake monies. They created fake bills with Tennant on the 10s, because he's the 10th Doctor, and producer Phil Collinson on the 20s. The 10s
say, I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of 10 satsumas, and no second chances, I'm that sort of a man, directly quoting the Christmas Invasion. The 20 bill had a slightly misquoted line, there's no points being grown up if you can't be a little childish sometimes, from the 4th Doctor's debut episode Robots. We then had a marvellous chase sequence with the Doctor trying to rescue Donna from a taxi. This sequence was originally shown on Children in Need prior to this episode being aired, and I can honestly see why. It's one of the most thrilling segments in a Who episode to date. Director Aros Lin came up with the vision for the chase by merely pulling 4 toy cars out of his pocket and explaining the setup of the shots during a meeting. This guy must have such a vivid imagination because this sequence is wild. Seeing the reactions to Donna in her wedding dress earlier provided no hope for an escape outside of the locked taxi. Even the drivers, who looked mildly concerned, weren't exactly going to do anything for her either.
I've got places to be!
Maybe it's more empathy towards those kids that were sitting watching the entire chase unfold that reminded me of when I was a kid watching this, but it's the lengths the Doctor went to save this person he's just met that impressed me the most. The TARDIS swiveling between cars and the Doctor tying string was edited together in time with the score. The special effects have held up tremendously well, and Donna is only required to perform a little bravery whilst the Doctor does all the legwork. All of this climaxed when Donna puts the Doctor on the spot about Rose trusting him with this
great big juicy close-up,
accompanied by the silent enthusiasm from the mirrored audience, just made for an incredible little sequence. We then got a wonderful scene on the roof of somewhere in London where the pair shared their regrets. I loved this idea that a honeymoon becomes just a regular old holiday, and the Doctor remembering his first shared Christmas with hesitation and remorse filled me with emotion. We then got a flashback of how Donna and Lance got engaged. This contrast between how she imagined it and how it really happened is disingenuous, but did make me laugh. Combined with the sight of the reception being in full swing without her, I mean, what a nightmare. This complete reversal of the narrative worked wonders for the pair's relationship. The fake crying and winking just solidified the fishiness of this wedding, and that the Doctor, the guy she believed was from Mars that she met that day, was the only person she could trust. When things were reconciled for appearances, they played another song written by Murray Gold exclusively for the Christmas episode. I'll be honest, I didn't think much of the song for 10 purely because it was just background for a montage, thus why I didn't bother mentioning it. Here though, the song acted to place the focus back onto the Doctor and his grief over losing Rose. Whilst lyrics like "All I have is this anguished heart, for you have vanished too" were more on the nose, the song's namesake lyrics "My body's tired of travelling and my heart don't wish to roam" amplified the Doctor's feelings of not wanting to be alone. Throughout the episode, we got the impression that in spite of the non-stop rigorous investigation the Doctor was performing, his Achilles heel will always be blondes. I mean trauma. The Doctor then caught up with the wedding videographer, and believe me when I say they all have long hair like this because I used to do this too. Unfortunately, the trumpeteers came back and even activated another killer Christmas tree. They opted for a cheaper and less threatening option this time, with the Bulbuls bombing the place. They even played a grand operatic version of A Christmas Song again, and even used the sonic screwdriver to blow it all up. It all just felt a little too familiar for me to truly appreciate. What's worse was this particular scene was where the issue of filming a Christmas episode in the summer reared its head, particularly the bluish tones that were applied in post to these exterior shots. The Doctor, Donna and Lance then went over to the company they worked for to find out more. I thought it rather amusing that Lance would even be allowed to drive, hence why they just cut straight to them running into the building. This was the moment when Donna elaborated on her explanation about why she couldn't remember these catastrophic events in the series on Earth. This once again made her so unique as a character in spite of being a nothing special temp from Chiswick. Then we got the first of many iconic Segway sequences in that recycled corridor. We then got a bunch of exposition about Huon particles trying to explain Donna's chemical significance. Unfortunately, we then saw the episode's budget hit its limits with a horrendous looking green screen.
And we were literally facing a sheet of green material.
And a hole that went deeper than the Satan pit. The Rachnos was certainly impressive in design. Heck, only the eyes are CGI. The rest is actually real. It's the fact that she wasn't on the same set as the Doctor and Donna that prevented me from truly enjoying this scene. But I think the actors do just enough to make it look somewhat convincing. This is even surprising for me to say, knowing that the pair had very little time to rehearse their performances. I think that the very improvisations the pair share contributed volumes to their performances. I did also like the twist that Lance was working with the spider the whole time. How hilariously cruel it was that he would prefer a giant man-eating spider woman than a temp from Chiswick. How he laid it so thickly onto Donna as though she deserved it was heartbreaking. Even more impressive was how the Doctor wasn't even allowed an explanation for it all. With the Rachnos being very exposition heavy, thankfully Lance put a temporary stop to that.
I think he wants us to talk.
I think so too.
Well, tough.
The Doctor was then able to get himself and Donna out by reversing the operation of getting Donna into the TARDIS. I found it quite emotional to see Donna's utter heartbreak colliding with the Doctor's curiosity. I'm sure this would have been the last place she'd wanted to be when finding out her husband was just using her for the chance to see the stars. Unfortunately, her makeup was cleaned up rather quickly after crying, and the Doctor then took her to see the formation of the Earth. I always found this beautiful sequence fascinating, especially with the idea that aliens were the reason the Earth was formulated in the first place. The idea of God even gets thrown into the equation if you think about it too much. It just looked so wonderful and sinister at the same time. Unfortunately, they also showed Lance getting waterboarded by a water cooler bottle that just took all that magic and wonder away from me. The TARDIS was dragged back to the 21st century, and the Doctor used that Slitheen surfboard to reappear 200 meters to the right. Suddenly, that green corridor from earlier turned blue, and Donna got strung up in the web with Lance. I did find this moment initially quite funny, but the Rachnos' combination of chemical voice commands and exposition didn't sit very well with me. After feeding Lance to her children, the Rachnos decided to start electrifying the humans on the ground for meat. It's not a terrible idea, but the scope of this attack wasn't very well executed on camera. Most shots were just overly lit people looking a bit worried, or were too blurry to even identify what was happening. The cherry on the cake was this shot of a little girl with a stem of lightning slowly creeping towards her. Just look at this guy on the bus. He looks like he's enjoying this slaughter far too much. The Doctor then turned up to rescue Donna disguised as one of the pilot fish. I did love that Spider-Man web swing that Donna performed, a nice example of the sonic screwdriver doing something miraculous with rather embarrassing results. Even the controller bigger on the inside pockets twist was rather swell too. I always thought that this controller was the controller you'd get if you owned a remote controlled Dalek. Never had one, always wanted one. It is coming up to Christmas though, guys. Things got pretty dark pretty fast though when the Doctor drowned the Rachnos' children. The beating drums heard alongside this aerial shot really displayed a spiraling darkness that the Doctor was able to conjure like some evil wizard or something. This is quite a thorny moment though if you consider how angry the Doctor became the year before when Harriet Jones ordered the killing of the Sycorax. However, the no second chances principle could certainly have applied here too. Considering he doesn't have Rose around this time, I think he found justification inside the historic conflict the Time Lords had against the Rachnos. Thankfully, Donna put a stop to the cruelty and madness so evidently portrayed on Tennant's face in these close-ups. The Rachnos' spider ship was then destroyed by a tank. I found it very interesting that Harold Saxon gave the order before he'd even become the Prime Minister. The Doctor then took Donna home where she condemned Lance's actions. I think she got a little too encouraged by the Doctor's violent behaviour here when saying that he deserved what he got, and to then see her immediately retract it was a nice moment. It did make me wonder how she's going to explain his disappearance to, say, Lance's parents or the police? Somebody's gonna have to remind me if that ever got followed up on in the future, because I certainly can't remember if it did or not. The Doctor then made it snow from the TARDIS in an attempt to keep hold of some company before his inevitable departure back into the wilderness of time and space alone. In spite of that, Donna gave out a truly unique reaction, turning down the Doctor's offer and fully admitting that she fears him. She wasn't sucked into the idea of seeing the beauty of the universe like Lance was, because she saw the dark side of the universe and by extension the Doctor. An alteration of the Doctor's theme can be heard playing underneath this moment too, really hammering home that this destructive behaviour isn't going to get the Doctor any sympathy. He was left with a bitter pill to swallow, a big enough pill that caused him to regress back to not even having Christmas dinner.
I don't do that sort of thing.
Even this failed escape attempt pulled on my heartstrings.
I just have to park her properly. She might drift off to the Middle Ages. I'll see you in a minute.
The episode wrapped up on a rather positive note though, with Donna insisting on the Doctor finding somebody. The choked delivery of the final line from Tennant was bloody fantastic. What a send-off to Rose. And of course, the Be Magnificent line was magnificent, with the prospect of a great companion to come in the future.
I think Catherine would have stayed if we'd asked her.
You're just such a tease.
So, did it suck? It's a pretty solid Doctor Who episode. Donna and the Doctor's interactions are hilarious, building the groundwork for their eventual partnership. It's quite the transformative experience for Donna, with Catherine Tate really nailing this role given how little time she had to prepare for it. When I was younger, I probably would have seen her inclusion as a bad thing, considering how attached I became to Rose. Now, as a matured man of taste, I find a more mischievous and rebellious character to be a far more interesting companion to me, not taking a single ounce of the Doctor's shit. Sadly, this episode has a lot of recycled elements, and the later into the episode we get, the more the cracks start to show. The big baddie Rachnos may look good, but truly she was just a lot of hot air. I give The Runaway Bride a 7 out of 10. Thanks for watching. This is the final Doctor Who review of 2020, so a big thank you from me to all of you for your continued support and viewership. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to everyone watching. Going into the new year, I'll continue ploughing into Series 5 and beyond. What do you think of this episode? Comment below your thoughts or join us for a chinwag on my Discord server, where we'll continue this discussion.